Call to order for Watertown City Council meeting for September 5th of 2023. Councilman or Deputy Mayor Tupper has a moment of silence that he would like to do.
To we all rise?
Yes.
I'd like to ask for a moment of silence for the fallen firefighter from Covor, South Dakota, who lost his life in line of duty at a fire in Huron. Our thoughts and prayers go out to him and his family and the community. So, a moment of silence, please. Thank you.
And then the chair would like to recognize Reverend Michael Lasley from Covenant Reformed Church here in Watertown to lead us in prayer.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to read to you just a small passage here from Mark's account of the gospel before we pray. And as you all are very aware of, we live in a world that doesn't quite work right, or very rarely does. And so it takes a lot of work and a lot of service to deal with that. And we are so thankful. We should all be so thankful for those who serve and even give their lives, as we heard just earlier. And our prayers do go out to his family and all those who loved him and all those he served. And so let me start by putting on my glasses so I can read here. So this is just a very short passage, as most of Mark's passages are. It's very short and to the point. And this is a time when Christ was first revealed, and after his baptism, Father in heaven had announced him as his well-beloved Son, with whom he is well pleased. And he had come from the wilderness after being tempted, and he came with a proclamation. And he came, Mark says, he came into Galilee proclaiming the gospel of God and saying, "The time is fulfilled and the kingdom of God is at hand. Repent and believe in the gospel." And ladies and gentlemen, that is a sincere offer of our Lord Jesus Christ as the only solution to this fallen world and all that ails it, and the only fulfillment of all of our efforts of service. And so with that, I do sincerely thank God for each and every one of you. And I would like to pray that for you tonight, for your service, thankful to God for it. So let us pray. Heavenly Father, Almighty God, we thank you so much for revealing yourself to us that we might know you, that we might know, Lord, what ails this world and all the things that we struggle with and strive against. And Father, we thank you for the promise that you would one day send a servant, a king, a Messiah, a Christ, even your very own Son, as a solution. And Father, we thank you so much that when you sent him, he came not to judge, but to save. And Father, we thank you for his work in this world, even now in saving. We thank you for these, your servants and your public servants here whom you have appointed that serve this community in all the various aspects and ways that they do. And Father, we pray tonight that you would give them wisdom, that you would give them compassion, and that you would give them a love for you and a love for their neighbors. We pray that as they do their work tonight, that they would serve you with all their heart, strength, soul, and mind, and serve their neighbors as themselves. And we thank you for them. We ask your blessing upon this meeting and all who are here and all the discussion that will happen. And we pray that you be with them in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Finance Officer Bob Zine, please call the roll.
Okay, Shetty,
Here.
Tupper,
Here.
Bueller. Danforth.
Here.
Helene,
Here.
Jurens. Absent. Peters.
Here.
Thank you.
And just a note, Councilman Jurens will be joining us once the computer issues are resolved. So the quorum is established. Chair will entertain a motion to approve tonight's agenda with one change. We are going to be striking 11C. 11C is going to be removed. And that's the Lakes of Willow Creek Second Edition Annexation and Zoning. That will be removed. So with that one change, Chair will entertain a motion to approve today's agenda. Motion made by Councilman Danforth, seconded by Councilman Peters. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, the motion is to approve the agenda. All those in favor will please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Now is the time for open forum. If anyone is here who would like to address the council on an item that is not on today's agenda, now is your time to do so.
Good evening. My name is Mike Odland. I live at 1279 Cherry Drive. I think all of you probably know me, and I've been here too many times this year, but I'm here again. And I'm here to talk trees tonight, which wasn't even on my radar a few months ago. And the reason I'm here talking trees is because, excuse me, because earlier this year, the council approved unanimously a planned unit development that is right behind my house. And this PUD will include 3 12-unit apartment buildings and 3 fourplexes, so 48 units in all. The 36 apartments do not include any garages at all, and it's going to change significantly the look and feel of the neighborhood. So how does that relate to trees? Well, if you walk on my property right now, I don't have a single tree in my backyard. My wife and I, who's here tonight, Shannon, we discussed the idea of planting some trees in our backyard to provide some additional screening or privacy from the planned unit development once it becomes fully developed. And they've just started some earthwork back there now. I don't have a real deep backyard, but behind the back of my property line is about a 75 to 100 foot width of city-owned land. So the back of my property line is followed by a stretch of city land and then a drainage channel. And in order to maximize the screening of the trees we would like to plant, we need to get them a little bit further away from our house, which would require us to put them on city-owned land. So I reached out to Councilman Danforth, Councilman Bueller, City Manager Mack, and Parks, Recreation, and Forestry Director Dusty Roddick several weeks ago, and floated the idea to them saying, hey, we'd like to put up trees on city-owned land. We'll pay for them. We'll pay for the cost of the trees. We'll pay to have them professionally planted. We'll maintain them. We'll water them. We'll do everything. It's all on us. No out-of-pocket expense at all for the city. And although we weren't given any promises, the overriding answer we got back was, I can't say yes for sure, but that doesn't sound like it's going to be a problem. Without getting a for certain yes answer, I said, I'm not going to plant them, and later have the city come back and say, those trees are on our property, they got to go. I didn't want to make that investment without getting an assurance from the city that it's okay. We're talking about 6 to 8 foot Black Hills spruce trees native to this area. The trees, and we'd be talking about probably 5 trees behind our house. The cost of purchasing them and planting them would be probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,600. And we're willing to pay for all of it. And these Black Hills spruce trees grow about a foot a year, I'm told. So by the time they reach full maturity, we won't even be in that house anymore. It's going to benefit the people who come and buy the house after we're long gone. I really see this as a gift to the city. These aren't going to be our trees. We're planting them and giving them to you. The only thing we want to use is a piece of your land to plant them on, which I don't think is unrealistic considering the PUD right behind our house includes almost 2 acres of city-owned land. So if the city is willing to give a developer essentially 2 acres of land for a planned unit development, why can't we have a little strip of land to plant a few trees on? Well, I reached out to Manager Mack, and the response I got was, no, you can't do it because it will impede drainage in that drainage ditch, which I find completely unrealistic. The trees would be planted probably 50 feet away from the drainage ditch, so I don't see how it would impede. If you go back and look at that drainage ditch now, it's full of cattails and weeds, and that, to me, is impeding drainage. I don't know how trees 50 feet away would impede drainage in that water ditch. So just out of curiosity today, I Googled advantages of trees. And the first website that popped up, and you can go and look at it, it's communitygreening.org. The #1 benefit listed for planting trees, and I'm going to read verbatim here, stormwater mitigation. Trees help protect infrastructure by acting as a natural form of flood control. Their leaf canopies distribute rainwater over a wider area, while their root systems increase the amount of water absorbed into the ground. Together, they decrease stormwater runoff and soil erosion. To me, this is going to help you, not hurt you, and we're told that we can't do it because it would impede the drainage back there. And Councilman Danforth told me that this was not a council decision, but an administrative decision. I don't know if one person made it or a group of people made it. And I know some people might be sitting here tonight thinking, why are you wasting your time talking about trees? Well, sometimes I can be pretty stubborn. And when you think you're right and you have a case, you're willing to come here, sit in front of this microphone and look at all of you and say, I think I'm right. And maybe you don't. Now, I talked to Councilman Peters a couple of weeks ago, and he said, hey, if you want to put this on the agenda, let me know. We need 2 council members to agree to put it on the agenda, and then we can debate it and vote on it. And I gave it some thought, and I thought, no, I'm not going to do that, because at this point I've been told, no, we can't do it. But I wanted to bring this to your attention and essentially put the ball in your court. If 2 of you folks tonight agree that, you know, that sounds like a good idea, it's not unrealistic, they're going to plant them, they're going to pay for them, it's not going to hurt the drainage back there. If you're willing to put it on the agenda in a couple of weeks and okay it, we'll go to work and we'll write a check and we'll get the trees in. And one other thing I should mention too, this strip of city-owned land that we would like to plant these trees on, I've lived in my house for 8.5 years, and the city has never once mowed that land. They have on the opposite side of the drainage ditch, to the north side where the PUD is going in, but on the south side adjacent to my backyard, it's never been mowed. So I mow it, I bag it, I use my mower, my gas, my time, I've watered it, I've fertilized it, I've put down weed control on it, and I've done that for 8.5 years and haven't asked the city for a penny. And I don't think it's unrealistic to think that this is a good thing for the city. I don't think it would do anything for the city's public image to deny a resident who wants to plant trees and do it at their own expense the opportunity to do that. So that's my pitch tonight. I'm putting the ball in your court. If 2 of you or more think that it's something that can or should be talked about in 2 weeks, I'll be back here again, and I'll answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to address the council on an item that is not up for consideration tonight? I'll close open forum, and we will go to the first item on our agenda for tonight, which is a presentation from Watertown Development Company regarding our just completed housing study. So I think we have the WDC Director, Chris Clifton, and also Tracy Stein from the WDC here.
Thank you. I'll try to be brief. We've got a copy for each of you on a complete study. Let me tell you what.
Yeah, could we get him a portable microphone? If you want to stand, that's fine with us.
Oh, no, I'll sit down.
Well, it's up to you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm used to walking around, so. I want to tell you what the housing study has shared with us, what the takeaways are in a brief overview, and then kind of answer some questions that you may have about the housing study. And then tell you a little bit about what the housing study doesn't do for us and how that should impact what we do long-term. Tracy run through these real quickly. The project scope and the time frame. This was really just a snapshot of the first 2 quarters of the year. It really doesn't do you any good to look at the review document until you look at the past history to kind of get a feel for what the trend is.
Okay. Yeah, so this is an update to the present, or to the housing study that we had done in 2019 because of all the activity that we had with all of the apartments that went up downtown. So we thought we would need an update for that. So the area that we're talking about is Cottington County, and we've got those 17 townships and 6 cities involved. And then, so one of the things that stood out in the housing study was that 1/3 of our households live alone. So we're seeing an increase in that since 2010.
What do you mean by alone?
Single, just one person.
Okay.
And then like I discussed earlier, with the update required us to do on the multifamily construction that's been happening. So this is the residential building permit trends that we've seen over that last 22, 23 years. And so you can see that spike where all those apartment buildings started to go up for those permits during that summer between 20 and 21. And then they kind of scaled off in 22. And then I threw this one in today just to kind of show too the residential single-family building permits that have happened over the course of that time as well. There was quite a bit of a spike there in May of 22. And those are the capital investment, the numbers for those housing permits that went up for the single-family.
Excuse me, Mrs. Stein. I think that a couple of us don't have those last 2 slides.
These two?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Or if we
Yeah.
do have them, they're not in the sequential order that you're showing them. But anyway,
It-
we'll just watch along and,
Yeah,
do
and
our
I don't
best.
think you do have them. Chris asked that I put these in today, so I guess I forgot to put them in the
That's all right.
PowerPoint. But
it's all right.
we just wanted to show the amount of dollars that are being invested in the community and the housing that's going up. So the rental housing overview, 38% of them are renters in the study area. Single-family detached and townhomes is 33% of the rental stock. 65% of existing renters qualify for that market rate housing. There is a rise in those lifestyle renters. And 48% of renters, 1-person households, and 75% 1- and 2-person households. So we've got that 1.5% vacancy rate, and that is justifying the need for additional housing and apartments to go up. The average rent rate right now is $1,056 or $1.34 a square foot. Go this way. And these are the apartments that, according to the study, are showing that increase that that are showing what happened over the course of that time. So we had the Plains apartments that went up north of town. That would be north of Relia Bank. Parkside Place is the apartment building that went up next to County Fair. The flats on 8th is closer to the Little River City area, Office Peeps. The Lofts is downtown on Broadway. And the Oaks is next to St. Mary's Cemetery there, right off of Highway 212. And 1 and 2 Willow Creek are on the east side of 19th Street behind Casey's gas station. And they show that their vacancy rates are 0% on most of them. There's a 5% rate on the Lofts and the Oaks, but everyone else is showing 0, close to 0. So we have those lifestyle renters driving the rental growth. The barbell renters, those are the millennials and the baby boomers. We've got young college-educated people with high incomes. The baby boomers, lack of active adult product, desire to right size, simple lifestyle, et cetera. Married couples with kids are increased to 14%, and fewer renters doubling up in the pandemic recession. Are there any questions so far? Am I going too fast? No? Okay, so,
Councilman Peters has a question.
sure.
On the plains, is it 0% vacancy on all 3 buildings? Or just the ones that are currently up and running?
At the time of the survey, that was 0% on what units were available. That's changed, obviously, since the study's about 45, 60 days old,
Got it.
so.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So the trends that they're seeing now with the apartments is that they're developers, investors, and lenders that are doing that preferred asset. Demand is driven by strong demographics of the millennials and the baby boomers that we just talked about. Renters by choice, the lifestyle renters are driving that market. There's a strong desire for rental units with more space, yards, et cetera, especially for pets included. There is a lack of for-sale supply and higher mortgage rates that is fueling that demand as well. I think it's above 7, it's around 7.5% currently for mortgage. Hospitality services are moving into rental spaces as well. And we're seeing challenges delivering new product at reasonable price points for building. And new construction is difficult to pencil in higher interest rate environment that we just talked about. So right now, we're seeing a record low supply. So we've got single-family and multifamily in the red, single-family in the blue. It's a little hard to see, but 163 listings into the 2019 study is down 66% now today. And 50% of the listings are newer construction. We do have a sufficient lot supply for empty lots for new single-family homes to go up on. There are 13 subdivisions with lots that are 296 of them are vacant. Half of those vacant lots in the Valley View Additions subdivision. The average assessed values of those lots are around $48,864, and new home construction is around $284,200 for an average. The new construction market for those markets are move-up buyers with an average price of $370,000, and there is lack of entry-level product on the market right now.
Yeah, let me,
City Manager Mack has a question.
Sure.
Thanks. I don't see anything about generations on first on here. Is that taken into consideration with the vacancy rate or what is currently available on the market?
They do disclose that in here on one of the slides. I believe they took that out for the units that had yet to be completed.
so in other words, it's not in the calculations.
So no.
It's not. Okay.
And Director Clifton, you were about to say something?
Well, I would just want to reemphasize, go back one more slide if you would, just reemphasize that last statement under new construction market, lack of entry-level product. I think that's important to remember.
So, yeah, the entry-level products that are being affected now, especially by the mortgage rates, since they are increasing. This chart shows the historical 30-year mortgage rates, and we're back on that rise up. And hopefully, we don't get as high as it was in 1980. So the housing costs to build, it's 45% increase over the past year. You can see there on the chart that once they've got that household income and then they get their mortgage and they're ready to make their payment, we're looking at close to $3,000 a month for a mortgage payment on a single-family household.
City Manager Mack has a question.
I'm very sorry. Do we have a definition for entry-level product? I mean, is there a price point? Is it, I mean, at one point it was 150,000, 250, 300?
Yeah, I'm a demand kind of person, so I think that you have to go look at the demand side. I mean, you can get all kinds of definitions of what that entry-level point is, but I think if you take the average job in manufacturing or service in that $25 an hour range, and you compare it to a construction cost of $195 to $210 a square foot, take your 30% rule. I mean, it takes 28 to 30 bucks an hour wage to retire the debt on an average home that's under construction or under these price constraints, especially in these interest rate environments. So, I mean, entry point and entry-level housing, probably, if you go back to the average manufacturing wage at 25 to 30 bucks a square foot, it's taken two incomes to support something in one bedroom at $900 a month. I think we mentioned earlier the average rental on the multifamily was $1,056. So you're missing a price point below that for an entry level, besides the additional compounded problems with access to capital for your down payment, capital assistance on that down payment, the tax implications, first-time buyer assistance, several other indices that keep you out of that. But that price point here locally is probably somewhere $900 to $1,800 a month for that 1, 2, 3, and 4 bedroom, rent to own or own, and that's subject to the down payment. So you can see the obstacles in place, and if you look at that income level in that $25 to $30 an hour range on manufacturing, you're still missing that by 10% on the front end to get a price point of an entry level.
Councilman Danforth has a question.
I'm just curious, sir, how many of our manufacturing and service jobs are paying $25 to $30 an hour here in town? Do we
Well-
all have some rough idea?
Yeah, I can't quantify that. I can just tell you in my last 6 weeks and touring the companies that are here, the Alphas and the others that are smaller than Terex, you know, $25, $30 an hour is kind of probably a 60 or 70 percentile of the norm. And those benefits are added between 25 and 40%, depending upon what company. I think the unique thing to remember, Councilman, is that there's probably 700 or 800 jobs sitting on the sidelines, ready to pay that rate, and they can't find a place to live in the marketplace. And it's so it's not so much do we need to raise wages. I think wages have risen, but you're at some point in time not scalable when you look at an average wage above $30K a year with a 30 or 40% benefit package, which is premium, and then you give the family or the individual absolutely very little entry-level options when it comes to price points on first-time home buying. Let alone on the rental side, your rental market is, you know, $200 higher than what your average for-profit individual buy a home, retire the debt, used a 10% down payment to establish a mortgage. And then you're looking at the mortgage gap between 65% of all the people that live in South Dakota have a mortgage of 4% or less. So if you're moving here from another location, you're sitting on a 3.5% mortgage and you're having to trade that off to a 7 or 8 in a new home buyer without a down payment, you can see how that problem is compounded. So you've done a good job filling a gap with some of the multifamily. The surprises that I think that you see in these numbers are you've got 300 lots that are fully permitted, paid for, infrastructure already in place, held by developers, that you're only moving 20 or 25 units a year in single family. So you got a good supply, but the problem is what's keeping your developers on the sidelines from jumping at, instead of 3, 4, 5, or 6 units a year, to 25, 35, 40 units a year when they're holding the inventory. So it's not like you don't have the sewer capacity, you're not building enough roads, or your school system's maxed out. You have all the capacities in place, and the developers are holding the lots. What's holding them on the sidelines? I think those are the questions that we need to ask above and beyond this study, and spend some time, which is our goal, with our local development community to find out why they're sitting on the sidelines, not taking the risks, owning the real estate, fully permitted, fully infrastructured, ready to go. Because those 500 or 600 jobs I mentioned earlier in manufacturing alone at 25 to 30 bucks an hour, 18 months from now, 24 months from now, won't be here. They can't wait. So you got a minor window that's only going to be open for a certain period of time, and that's why I think it's imperative that WDC and the community together meet with the local development community, as well as potentially meet with outside developers and find out what's holding things back. I know a number of reasons why that is, but can we impact those decisions and help abdicate some of the problems to bring the development community to the table? I think that's the question.
And some of those tools to alleviate some of those costs to help developers have been listed here in that housing study. Some of them we're already doing, obviously, the fast tracking. We do some tax abatement TIF. We've done land acquisition. I believe Prairie Haven out by Derby Downs has got the smaller lots for the smaller homes as well, so we're working on that. They suggest tiny homes, multi-gen accessory dwelling units. I'm not sure where we're at on that, but it's been brought up in the past. And Chris just talked about doing private-public partnerships as well, and we have had those discussions at the WDC from time to time. So those are some opportunities we could start looking at to alleviate some of those costs and get people into those starter homes. So the pending housing developments, we don't have anything on the rental side, but they don't list that here, but we do have the ruins that still needs to be completed. And so their recommendations here, their methodology behind all of it is, of course, the household growth and tenure, turnover, income qualified households, and demand by product. So we've got to look at these charts here. The general occupancy demand by type from 2023 to 2030 is what they're expecting is 303 units at market rate, affordable housing at 138 units, subsidized housing at 110 units, and multifamily at 36.
And keep in mind on this slide, the basis of how they project a generation of 900 units is based on the past. So I don't think they're taking into account what the actual market demand is when you look at the jobs that are on the sidelines, ready to be filled, that aren't being filled because they don't have a place to live, an affordable place to live.
There is a demand for 745 senior housing units by 2030. I do believe, too, that the Harmony Hill project is going to fulfill some of those, or most of those units that we're going to require here by then, including memory care and assisted living, independent living, and I believe they did talk about student housing out there. For the recommendations on the single family, of course, we've got a 3 to 5 year lot supply that they recommend. The current lot supply that we have right now is sufficient for the near term, but we need more diversity in those lot types. There is a demand for 250-plus single-family homes right now. There's demand all across those price points, from starter to the more expensive homes. For multifamily, we're looking at a demand of 84 units. There's a strong demand for association-maintained product. And the potential housing types there in the multifamily would be the twin homes or townhomes, the detached townhomes, and the quad homes. For the rental housing recommendations, they discussed demand for all incomes, household types, and product types. Recent construction boom is saying that there's only a 1.5% vacancy rate, but that suggests a pent-up demand. So the demand for 550-plus units would include 303 market rate that we discussed before, 138 affordable units, 110 subsidized units. And as we discussed before, it seems like this information just keeps getting regurgitated, but the demand for 700-plus senior units is going to be met, hopefully, by the Harmony Hill projects out there. There is strong demand for all senior types except for the senior subsidized housing, because we have existing stock. We've got active adult with the ownership, affordable rental and market rate rental, independent living, assisted living, and memory care. So the key takeaways from the study that they did, the low 2% unemployment rate was one that stood out to me. The labor participation rate is strong versus the U.S. average around here. Rental housing construction boom, we've seen that, and hopefully that will continue, but we have very low rental vacancy rates, so we have that need for an increasing demand. And let's see, the lot supply is sufficient for the short term, but more lots are needed. I think we've covered everything else there.
Questions?
All right, Councilman Shetty, lead us off.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, just a question. I don't see any data on Lake Area Tech College. I was just curious, are there any numbers that have come out on the occupancy rate as far as the technical college students using, what percentage of those apartments, if you will?
Yeah, the demand side wasn't differentiated by, who the renter is, but all you have to do is take $1,056 as your average entry level, and I'm not sure, after talking to tech directors and their staff, that there's a great deal of demand that's being met by, a unit price at $1,056 for a college student. And I would say the same thing if it was a four-year institution. So I think what you're finding is those that have come out of other rental units locally in shared apartments or shared housing are the ones that are picking up that component in the new apartments, and they're backfilling it with students and others at Tech. And then I think there's a demand there. I mean, there's some property owners around the school that have already expressed to us that they're looking at some potential housing designs for student housing in and around the institution. So, I think that's an unmet demand still.
Councilman Peters.
One last question for you guys. I didn't see anything in here about the grants that were passed on the state level, the $200 million of infrastructure grants. We were in here not too long ago passing a resolution for those. Realistically, how much do you think that will move the needle if rates continue to rise?
Yeah, Kyle, I think the injection of the capital is important, and we do have 3 local community groups, private individuals, for-profit individuals that are participating in that competitive process right now, as you know. It would be my hope that all 3 of them are involved in the award process, and we've been encouraged to help them with that. I have not yet met with all 3 of them to find out how we implement that, but I do think that they do have some good quality applications from what I've seen. I just don't know how competitive they're going to be when you look at the rest of the state. I'm told at the state level that they want to disperse those funding cycles out there and not have them clustered in the major metros. If that's the case, then I think Watertown should be in pretty good shape. But, politics, we'll see.
Thank you. Any further questions, council? Councilman Danforth?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. The previous mayor, Mayor Karen, had I guess a group of people, committee, whatever, that met for periods of time on affordable housing. And it was always difficult, right, to determine what affordable housing is. But we felt like a dog chasing our tail. Because we don't control land cost, we don't control material costs, we don't control labor, we don't control interest rates, we don't control their ability to have a down payment. What we do control to some extent is our requirements for development and some of the infrastructure costs. In all, that ended up not being sufficient to be able to bring something down to what was deemed to be affordable housing. Where do you go with this?
Yeah. Why don't you put that on the slide? I'll give you an example from my experience that I've run by a couple of local developers. This is an example out of a company in Georgia that's building in Fort Wayne, Indiana. The development that I'm talking about is probably a $55 million development. It has 1, 2, 3, and 4 bedrooms. Entry price points in that ownership at $850 at the bottom end, and 1 bedroom, 1 bath. All the way up to $1,850 for the 4 bedroom, 3 bath. I think the product is out there, and it can be built even at $195 or $200 a square foot. Yes, you're exactly on point. The only things you can impact is underwrite the land costs, underwrite the infrastructure cost. And I think there's an opportunity in Watertown to do that with some existing developments that are not fully developed yet. So you're not trying to replicate something. But I think the first and foremost question is ask your local development community why they're sitting on 300 lots that they've already invested thousands and thousands of dollars on, and what's keeping them out of taking that risk. And is there some way we can impact positively to reduce that risk? When it comes to some communities that have participated in collective first-time homebuyer assistance, where they're actually putting cash dollars down with a commitment from the homebuyer to retire the debt long-term on that initial cash injection. That's a possibility that you could consider here. It's being done throughout the country in a lot of places. It just depends on the price point and who you want to help. My feeling is you want to help your local development community first, because they're the ones that have borrowed the money, took the risk, and encouraged themselves to be an active player in the marketplace. So I think that's why we go first and foremost to our local development community and say, how can we help move you into construction? Personally, what I'm hearing is find me a skilled electrician, bricklayer, mason, landscaper, and help me do it in scale. I can hire those skill sets and build 3, 4, 5 houses a year. But if you ask me to build 40, I can't get the skill sets here from anywhere, let alone Lincoln, Minneapolis, or Great Falls, or any other local marketplace. So I think there's a disconnect there on the scalability of the skill sets that we need to build to market. Ideally, you're looking at the demand side on the price point of what I mentioned earlier in that $850 or $900 to $1,700, $1,800. You're looking at probably a deficiency of 250 to 400 units. If you take the job creation number that I mentioned on the demand side and match that up. So I think the conundrum that we're under is we've got to encourage the investors that are on the sidelines, encourage them with some kind of program or programs, and there's probably not one solution to come off the sidelines and invest the capital that they have and build vertical. Part of it, I think, is communicating the needs that Terex and Dakota Body and others have of jobs ready to be filled at the rates that I mentioned, that are going unfilled because they've got people that want to move here, but they're given no housing choice. They love the marketplace, they love the cost, they love the education system, they love the quality of life, but when it comes to their choice and their price points, the opportunity doesn't exist for them. So how do we build some supply in that regard? And then I think it also goes back to your question, Councilman, about chasing your tail. Yeah, at some point in time, you got to stick a stake in the ground and you got to say, how do we solve this? And you got to rally the community around that, just like you did the ice arena, just like you did in the health care and that wellness center, just like you did in saving the hospital. And I think it's a premier issue that's only going to be available to Watertown in the next few years, is to try to meet the demand for housing that you have out there for the job side. Very, very unique. Not a lot of communities have jobs on the sidelines ready to be filled, and it's just a matter of finding a place for people to move their family to. The other side is, I think you have to do what the governor is trying to do, and Watertown needs to be a destination place, just like South Dakota has to be a destination place. This marketplace is no different than Georgia or South Carolina or anywhere else. It has some great qualities and great quality of life. I think we need to say that more often, and then we need to do what I mentioned earlier about moving product into the marketplace and taking some risks. That's what WDC was created to do, is take a little risk that the banking community wasn't prepared to take. And today, in the rate environment that you're in, it's probably pretty evident that maybe we need to underwrite not only some land costs and bring some new land and infrastructure into the marketplace, but maybe we start underwriting some first-time home buyers or some move-up buyers. There's only so much you can do to affect the invisible hand of a free market economy, but I think there's some small programs on a scalable basis you can do here that will set Watertown apart, and we see that at WDC as one of our primary missions.
Any further questions? Any further questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We're going into ordinance first readings. Item A is a first reading of ordinance number 23-18, authorizing the finance officer to certify the property tax levy to the Cottington County Auditor. We'll go to our city manager, Amanda Mack, first.
Sorry, I got messed up on my agenda here. Thank you. This is the first reading of our annual property tax levy. There's no action to be taken tonight. To note, we are requesting $173,767 additional dollars over the 2023 levy. And with that, I will turn it over to our finance officer for any questions you might have.
Before we do that, I just want to recognize that Councilman Jerns is in attendance now. He just took a couple moments to get on, and we can see his not so smiling face online. So, Finance Officer Bob Zine.
Thank you, Mayor. Really not much more to add. We did take the full state approved CPI, which was 3%, and then we have about 1.24% growth in with that. So that's what makes up our property tax levy for 2024. So thank you.
Just first reading, so no official action, but we will take questions and have discussion. Council? I guess we will not have discussion or questions. We will have a second reading on that coming soon. Councilman Jerns, just feel free to interrupt if you want to, or you can also text me that you have a question or anything like that, just to make sure that I recognize you if you want to speak. Item B is a first reading of ordinance 23-19, amending the zoning map of the city of Watertown of the Kranz Edition from its current designation of R1 single family to C2 local commercial district. We'll go to our community development manager, Brandy Hanton.
Thank you, Mayor. I thought Manager Mack was teeing it up.
No, not on this one.
Okay, sounds good. So this is the first reading of the Kranz Edition rezone, where the property is currently located on North Highway 81, and it's currently zoned R1 Single Family Residential, and the petitioner is proposing to rezone it to C2 Local Commercial, which the property does meet the minimum lot size for the C2 district. It also conforms to our comprehensive land use plan, as Highway 81 is a arterial route that you would have commercial zoned, especially with redevelopment in that location.
All right, thank you very much. Just a first reading, so we will have questions and discussion. Council? Any questions or discussion, council? All right, might as well stay up there.
Sounds good.
We are going to take items C, D, and E for discussion all at one time, unless there's an objection. It's all dealing with the same thing. I will try to specify for discussion purposes, try to focus the council on a certain item at a certain time, but for the sake of bringing the information forward, we will take C, D, and E all together. And these are first readings of ordinances. The first is dealing with a zoning text amendment to the CL, Lake Commercial District of Revised Ordinances. Second, they're all essentially the same, but I'll let City Manager Mack explain them.
Well, I will not be sharing the details of these. I will be teeing these up. This was what I had on my list to tee up, not the previous one. But as was heard at the Plan Commission last week, this has been a topic of conversation for the council for quite some time. And we have had a few rezoning requests come to this body in the last couple of years related to Commercial Lake. And there were some concerns, questions, thoughts around permitted uses, conditional uses, and definitions. And so after the last work session, I couldn't give you the date, it happened a couple of months ago. Staff took what we thought we heard, there was consensus around, and brought it forward for some consideration. The Plan Commission did recommend approval of these amendments. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Brandy to share details of them.
Thank you, Manager Mack. So as Mayor Holeen has let us know, that we'll be discussing these all, the three in one, because they are also related. So the first ordinance amendment here that we're looking at is for the CL district itself. And through that work session where we discussed with the city council the more intrusive uses and then moving them down from permitted uses to conditional uses so that they would be heard by the Board of Adjustment if those uses were desired to be utilized. And that if a rezone were approved, that there would not be the opportunity for that just to be a permitted use. So those include moving campground, storage shops, and apartments down to conditional use. And then also adding convention center or banquet facilities. That was already a use in our ordinance. And really just in looking at all of our current uses and then just applications and desires of potentially looking at adding that as a permitted use. And then having campgrounds, apartments, storage shops, those will be conditional uses. And also adding boat repair shops, which I'll get into, that's a new use that we added to ordinance, and we defined that as well. And I'll explain that further when we get down to that ordinance amendment. So these are the proposals for the CL district itself. And then the related ordinance amendments are for the definitions. I'll make sure that how they're ordered here. All right, then we'll jump into the definitions. And you can see here for boat repair shops, we thought that obviously it would be applicable to be located near the lake. So we took the repair shops, and this is where the definitions were already very redundant, because in retail establishments, which is a permitted use in the CL district, it mentioned repair shops. But in ordinance, we actually have a definition and use for auto body repair shops already that includes the repair shop. So that's where it was redundant. So we struck that from retail establishments. And then, so it didn't open it up to a use that was already defined. And then added that boat repair shops definition. And we also clarified apartment, that definition, because that used to reference C dwelling unit, which then listed all of the different types of dwelling units, and it wasn't specific that it was really multifamily as an apartment is. So then this references multifamily, townhouse, complex, and attached row, because those are the multifamily dwelling units that we describe in ordinance today. So that just adds more clarification. And then service establishment, because it was just to clean that up a little bit, that definition, because it used to say establishments offering a wide range of personal services. Okay, yeah. So that one was just more clerical. And then the caretaker's residence as well, that was to clarify that, as the Board of Adjustment had always been dealing with applications there and having a hard time with how that definition read and the true intent behind a caretaker's residence. So that's the definitions portion. And then we'll move on to the campgrounds, which, because campgrounds are being moved from a permitted use to a conditional use in the CL district, we wanted to clean up the campground section itself, which is chapter 2176. Because there were always issues when we were administering that ordinance. So in doing and just wrapping these all together, we added clarification as far as the hard surfacing and pavement. And then for the attendant and supervisor, living quarters, and also, and that kind of wraps into the not allowing for manufactured homes or mobile homes to be located on campsites. We did state in here, though, that the dwelling unit for the campground attendant or supervisor shall not be a manufactured home or mobile home, which is actually something that, in speaking with Director Von Eye, if council would want to consider striking the manufactured home, means that we are specifically talking about no manufactured homes or mobile homes shall be located on campsites. We, as a separate point here, where for the campground attendant and supervisor living quarter, is that something that we want to prohibit that it be a manufactured home? Or do we just want to say it can't be a mobile home? And then added more language for the screening to just create more buffer and protection for adjacent R1 single family. Since most of the areas where the CL district would be going is primarily zoned R1 single family residential, that if a property were to be rezoned to CL and a campground conditional use was granted, that there was just more screening and buffering between the two different zoning designations. And then the last one here on 11 is, that's clerical. That came up at Plan Commission. So with all of that, I'll stand by for any questions.
Manager Hatton, as long as you're up there before we go forward, what is the definition of a manufactured home? I know what my perception is of it, but I guess if you're asking us to consider an amendment, let's make sure that we all have the same definition.
Sounds good. And I will pull that up.
Okay, while you're pulling that up, I'm going to explain to the council and the public a little bit about how things are going to be handled on this issue tonight. We have 3 different items. I am going to allow latitude to speak to all 3, while still providing a little bit of guidance to stick to the certain items. So on A, I will be asking for your comments and questions regarding the permitted conditional. on item B, the definitions, just to provide a little bit of guidance, but I am going to provide a lot of latitude to speak on all aspects of this because they all pertain, or they all touch upon one another. I want to also say that I am going to enforce Robert's rules on this, which is you can, according to Robert's rules, you can speak twice on one item and for 10 minutes each. So I'm not as much of a stickler on speaking twice because I can understand that something might come up in your head and you want to speak on it later, that something comes up when someone else says something, but we'll be sticking to 20 minutes overall. I also want to say that I'm going to limit the scope to what is under consideration. So we have 3 actual things under consideration. That is what we are going to discuss, not something that is not in there. So this is a first reading. I do not have to allow public comment. However, it is always my policy to allow it. So anyone who is here who would like to speak to the council regarding any of these issues or all of them together are welcome to do so. We are going to treat it a lot like the open forum, which is you can come up and say what you want to say. I will not encourage council to engage with the speaker in regards to questions or discussion directly to the person. The time for that will be at the second reading, but I will allow latitude on that as well. So with that said, Manager Hanton, do you have a definition for us for manufactured home?
Yes, I have it pulled up here. And so it's a dwelling unit fabricated in an off-site manufacturing facility for installation or assembly at the building site, bearing a seal certifying that it is built in compliance with the Federal Manufactured Housing Construction and Safety Standards Code. And then do you want mobile home too?
I suppose.
So then that is a transportable structure larger than 320 square feet, designed to be used as a year-round residential dwelling and built prior to the enactment of the Federal Mobile Home Construction and Safety Act of 1974, which became effective for all mobile homes construction June 15th, 1976. So do you want me to, basically the difference is that it's really the manufactured home is not stick-built on site. So it's your ready-built home.
All right, thank you. So we will, I'm going to invite the public now to come forward. Manager Hanton, you can step aside if you want to, but be ready to bring forward if there's the need to call something back up to the screen. So any member of the public, you are invited to come and speak to the council right now. And I just ask you to please state your name, where you live, and actually you don't have to give the specific address or anything. I don't want people coming to your house. But just introduce yourself. If you represent an entity or a business, then just acknowledge that. Otherwise, we will assume that you're here representing yourself.
Okay, I'm Doug Modica, and I live right across the street from somebody who is applying for rezoning. And that was brought before you before and decided that there was a problem, and I really commend you because there's 3 points. Number one, the permitted use zoning was wildly too open, way too open to things. So I commend the Planning Commission because of you, it went back to the Planning Commission, and what they did is they actually took out 2 things, apartments, as you saw, apartments and, what was the other thing? Campgrounds. And then they modified something else, which is great, because they took some things out. But for some strange reason, they added convention centers, which would have banquet halls, and actually it says places where they could do shows, which could be an open auditorium. And so they added, they simplified, they took some things out, but then they added something else. Okay, so that's the thing, is it was way too open. It's still way too open, because there's things in there that just would cause a problem. And the problem is, once it's permitted use, that means even if they do conditional use, all those other ones are open. And so any property is sold, then anybody can come in and do anything they want with some of these limited things. Now, with these, number two, there are contradictions. I think the Planning Commission still needs to go back and look at some things, because look at this. It says one conditional use that you have to get permission to do from the public is automobile parking lot. But yet they allow service establishments, restaurants, recreational facilities, religious institutions, convention center. Those will all have parking lots. So why is it a conditional use for a parking lot when the permitted things are going to have parking lots? You see the problem there? The other thing is a contradiction, is you can have restaurants in the limited use, but yet a bar or a tavern is conditional use. I'm not going to say what's the difference, but they're still going to have parking lots. And so that's a problem. Another thing that came up is that in limited use, you can have recreational use. And these people want to be zoned into the city. And so the whole discussion came up about horses. Well, if they're rezoned for limited use and they're annexed into the city, you can't have horses in the city. And so some people argued, they said, oh, well, that's a recreational use. We'll allow horses in the city. There's contradictions. There's contradictions here. And then the third thing is accessory structures. I was reading through what can happen. If anybody goes into this zoning, they can add accessory structures. And so things can be added to what already came in. So my suggestion, really, is go back to the drawing board and have everything be a conditional use. That way our neighbors that say, we just want to have some storage units next door. That's all we want is storage units. That's all we'll ever want. All the neighbors would be happy with that. But if it goes the way it does, they could either, by financial distress, or somebody comes in with a lucrative offer, they could sell their property, and then somebody could come in and put in any of these other facilities that the neighbors really don't want. We're very happy to have the people do what they want, but not open the door to wide open to all these other things.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to testify?
Hi, my name is Susan Conrady, and I'm a Lake resident. Could you bring back that first view of the ordinance, please? There you go. Thank you. When I was at the Planning Commission meeting the other day, we talked about the purpose, the stated purpose in the document defining the ordinance. And the first part of it is to establish appropriate locations for different uses of the land. And with appropriate locations at the lake, you've got to take into consideration the roads. Lake roads are narrow, they are twisty, they are hilly. They won't tolerate a lot of traffic safely. So if you're going to put something in that is going to bring a lot of public use or concentrated residential use, you're going to have to take that into consideration when you're dealing with that. Also, there's numerous areas in the lake roads that flood in the spring, and that also causes problems with people who need to get to their home. And if you're increasing that population of people, you're going to have more problems with that. The second issue, number two, under purpose, when I was at the Planning Commission the other day, the language was different under that number two. There was nothing saying to permit development, I don't recall anyway. And it talked about the purpose was to develop, the purpose was to add businesses that would increase the entertainment and enhance living for lake residents and visitors. And I'm just, it's off the top of my head, but I don't know if anybody else remembers that or not. So I'm not sure why that language changed. Anyway, I was at the 2018 presentation from the company from Minneapolis that did the Lake Compesca Master Plan. That's when this was first discussed, developing some sort of an ordinance that would allow for some business activity at the lake that would be of assistance to people who lived there and people who were visiting. And we talked about things like someone having a small business that maybe they want to rent paddle boards and towables and that kind of thing. We talked about how nice it would be to have a area that had a bar and a restaurant and an area with music and that sort of thing. I think the sandbar has probably changed enough now that it's meeting those needs. But it was meant to be this extremely narrow. It was only for those two purposes. There was nothing else talked about. And predominantly lake residents at that presentation, and everyone was in favor of those things. So when when I first saw this at a different city council meeting, I was very surprised to see all of the uses that were going to be allowed, apartment buildings and hotels and that kind of thing. I understand that the Planning Commission is trying to change some of the language in order to make this a little bit more workable. Personally, I don't think it goes nearly far enough. I think this zoning needs to be completely revisited. I think that if it's not, you're going to have many, many times where residents need to come and stand before the city council and explain to you why a proposed use is not appropriate for their neighborhood. You have to keep in mind that the lake is a very unique neighborhood. It's zoned R1 all the way around the lake. So people live out there often as their primary residence because they wanted peace and quiet and the beauty of the lake and to enjoy lake activities. You can change that a lot if someone buys up 2 lots next door to you and puts in a convenience store. Would you allow that to happen in any other residential neighborhood in town? You know, the middle of the Northeast, the middle of the Northwest. Would you allow that? You know, I don't think you would okay that. And I would just ask that you give the lake neighborhood the same consideration as all other neighborhoods in town. I would like to see you folks disband this ordinance or put a moratorium on it for a period of time that you deem appropriate and go back to the drawing board and limit yourself to things that are specifically created to enhance lake life, lake recreation, and visitors to the lake. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public would like to come forward?
Hi, excuse me. Hi, my name is Megan Norgard. I live right next door to, it'd be on Highway 81. They're asking for rezoning from R1 to C2. And I know my husband and I are very concerned about that property being rezoned to C2. We understand that without rezoning it, there's a potential that nothing is going to ever go in there.
Just a second, Mrs. Norgard. That's a different, we're talking about commercial lake only right now?
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
No, that was item B. Yeah, so I'll tell you what, if you could wait until after we're done with our discussion on CL, then I would let you come back and voice your concerns about item B.
Okay.
So, if
Sorry.
that's okay. No, it's all right. It's all
Fine.
right. So, sorry about that. Okay, anyone else from the public? Would you like to come forward and speak to the council?
Well, my name is John Kessler. I live on Salt Lake Drive. And I I would be opposed to making these changes to the ordinance just simply because I don't think that they go far enough. And Mrs. Conrady did a wonderful job of explaining her views, and a lot of them coincide with mine. I was reading the Compessa Master Plan earlier today, and I was reviewing everything that the input that the public gave and what they would desire at the lake. Most of it, of course, was directed at water quality. And farther down the line, there was mention of, as Ms. Conrady pointed out, small commercial properties to enhance the lake living. And there was some do not wants on that list as well. And one of them that stuck out to me, it said over commercialization, which, as it's currently written, the CL zoning district would allow just that. And I just to kind of back up what I had read there was an article in Public Opinion dated December 6, 2019, that reported on the proposal of the Lake Compesca Master Plan. And just to read just a couple words here. It says, in addition to ways of improving the lake habitat, Shires and Victor also touched on how to enhance on commercial and recreational opportunities surround the lake, noting that the majority of the public's desire to not surround the lake with large-scale commercial development, favoring smaller establishments and settings complementing the lake and existing neighborhood, and then it goes on from there. So that's why it seems like since that Lake Compesca Master Plan is that we've kind of lost focus when we got to the development of the CL zoning district. And I would be opposed to the changes simply because I think they're just a Band-Aid. Once things are moved in the conditional, like for instance, the campgrounds and large-scale housing, that only has to be approved by the planning, excuse me, the planning board or the Board of Adjustments, which is one and the same. That does not, as you know, that does not come back to this council for approval per state statute. So they become the be-all, end-all on any conditional use. So I don't think that goes far enough to help protect what the public wanted, what was stated in the Compesca Master Plan. But thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address the council? Anyone else? Okay, before I go into council deliberation, City Manager Mack did just lean over and say something to me about a clarification that she wanted to make regarding one of the comments.
Thank you, Mayor. We did go back and verify, and none of the language has changed from what was presented to the Plan Commission last week, other than the amendments that they requested that were approved.
Okay. So I will now open it up for council deliberation, and we will start with Councilman Jurens.
Yeah. Mayor Holeen, am I coming through loud and clear?
Very loud and clear.
All right. There's a little bit of noise around here. I'm in the conference center here waiting for, and I do have a smile on my face now that I know that I'm really live. The Watertown Arrows are in Huron tonight for Watertown Arrow volleyball. So sorry I couldn't be there. It's always best to be there to just get a feel and the passion that that those that are speaking on a subject have for it. Talk about passion. Being the newest member on the city council, I've also had an advantage to speak with bunches of people while I was campaigning, and now many more have came out, especially when we started the discussions on these types of ordinance changes. A lot of also I've done is reached out recently since this language has been changed and done my best to interpret what the ramifications would be, and then to ask those residents within and around Lake Compesca and in Watertown, what are your thoughts about it? And I think the first thing to maybe touch on is why are so many passionate about this? And I believe it's because we have an amazing resource. Chris talked about it earlier from the WDC. Who else in South Dakota has an amazing lake resource that everyone enjoys? Everyone from the city, farmers, farm communities, and a lot of people from around the region do. So I believe that's why we just sometimes forget about, even though a lot of us know how good of a resource we have, we take it for granted a lot of times. And can you imagine the area without this, without the swimming, without the fishing, without the many things and the activities and tons of camping that goes on there at the moment. So, that's the number one reason I just wanted to hit on. But number two is I think we need to realize that lake residents might be a little crazy. and that's, I'm saying that with a big smile on my face because, who else would pay overinflated prices for a land and a place to sleep? Who else would allow and pay taxes on assessed values in their mill levy that's way higher than other residents? So the multiplication of that really starts adding up. I mean, you take a $600,000 assessed value home out there right now, and it's getting real close to $8,000 a year in taxes. So, I mean, they have to be a little crazy. And what do they want? They just want some peace. They want they want to enjoy the resource, and they want to share the resource with some development. And that's where it comes back to the phrase responsible development. So the last thing, and the last thing that residents are, a little crazy about, why would you want to do all of this and pay all of this extra hard-earned money, and then it floods every 5 years? So just kind of one of those things which makes them a little bit different than others. So I just wanted to hit on those few things, but the one item that keeps coming up in conversation, and there's a few others, but this is the number one item that really, really concerns most, is the ability for someone to take a piece of property and really become a campground. And campgrounds are something that, if you look throughout the country and throughout our lakes in the area, and I'm not going to pick out certain ones because those of you that travel around, you will be able to pick them out if you haven't already, the campgrounds that are just interesting. And these are the type of campgrounds that most residents within Watertown and around the lake just don't want to see. So a lot of things right now are centering around the campground portion of this. And really, does conditional use go far enough? Does conditional use and the ability to have to come back through the Planning and Zoning Commission or the Planning and Zoning Boards really do enough? Or do, like some of them are telling me, and a lot of them are coming out, and I would encourage those to keep reaching out to us council members and reaching out to the mayor and the staff, that elected officials, they want to see elected officials make those decisions on those types of things. The campgrounds being one, and maybe 6-story apartment buildings. The spot zoning keeps coming up. My question today was, is spot zoning that bad? Well, we don't really want to be known as a community that allows spot zoning, but a lot of people would like that sort of thing around the lake. And can that be done? So the conditional use, yeah, I know we've dropped that with this language. We've put a couple permitted uses into conditional use. As of right now, I don't think that goes far enough. That's my comments.
Thank you, Councilman Gus. Raise questions. Councilman Danforth.
I too have had a lot of discussions with people, and I did attend the planning commission, the last meeting. I don't remember what the date was, but the last one they had. And at the end of that meeting, the indication that I got from most of the people, if not all, on the plan commission was an understanding that this thing needs to get looked at. And if you don't believe me, then please go back and watch that, the end of that. And you'll see that that's actually a recommendation by Mr. Kays. Mr. Culhane was in agreement. I know there's at least 2 other people that called me and talked to me about it. So that's 4 people that I know for sure, 4 people that are saying, we thought we had a good product, but we know we don't. And we need to, it's not perfect, it's not terrible, but it's somewhere in between. And the recommendation on their part was, we need to go back and we got to revisit this thing in some manner. And that's where I'm at right now, is I'm struggling with, do I vote for this or against this? Because I don't agree with either one of them. That's my problem. I do believe that in light of where we're at, I'm better off voting for what's being proposed, because at least it moves the needle somewhere. But I will tell you that however that turns out, I'm not done personally pushing for discussions and reevaluation of this ordinance. And there are just a lot of things that are contradictory. There was a gentleman here that talked about the contradictions. There really are a lot of contradictions when you go back through this thing. The biggest disconnect that I have, to be really honest with you, is I have spent hours looking at the Lake Compesca Master Plan, which is the basis, supposedly, for the creation of this CL zoning. And there's a complete disconnect with what is being said in that document, at least what I'm reading, versus what's in this ordinance. And again, the devil's in the detail. I wasn't at all those meetings. I don't know a lot of the language. There's a lot of other instances of things that we have done that I have questions on, that really contradict what we have in here and what some of our requirements are or aren't. I do have some questions, though, Mayor, that if I may. If we are, right now, and there has been an expression of the roads, I'll call it that, primary roads around Lake Compesca, and separating out Highway 20, which is to itself good shape, but the other roads that go around there are in very tough shape. I mean, just driving around there it's kind of wild, but they're narrow. They don't have, a lot of them don't even have sides of the roads, just go straight down into the ditches. And so one of my questions is if we take an area and we zone it CL and it's large enough and somebody decides they're going to put in, which is if someone want to come back to, they want to put in a convention center or a banquet facilities, okay? And I liken that to, Sioux Falls has what's called a district. That's kind of what that is. It's not associated to a restaurant. You go in there and you can have events, you can have weddings, you cater your food, or like we have here in town, Studio 212 or whatever it's called. What if something like that was out there, and what if it's very popular, successful? Now we've got a significant body of people at times that are using our roads that are barely worthy of the residents living around the lake right now. I think the gentleman that had spoke earlier had talked about truck traffic out there delivering to these services. That's very real. So my question is, if we're talking about redevelopment, okay, taking land that's currently in the city and we're rezoning it for redevelopment, and ultimately we decide that we have to do something with our road, who pays for that? How is that paid for? New development is paid for by the people that are bringing the land and developing the land, correct? Okay, but what do we do when it's redevelopment? Who pays for that? Is that something that we have to budget for? In the city, we're the ones liable for that? And how many miles is it around the lake? Like 13, 16, something like that. So are we ready to make miles and miles of improvements on that road? That's concerning if we are actually talking about something that may occur that is successful and draws in a larger number of people. So I don't know the answer to that. Who pays for that? One of the things that in definitions, and I struggle with this, some of the definitions end in and miscellaneous or et cetera. What does that mean to me if I'm on the public side looking at it? Who decides what miscellaneous or et cetera is? That doesn't work when we're talking about something that can be very controversial. So let me just keep going here. One of the things and Brandy, I'm going to have to ask you if I'm okay, Mayor, of asking Brandy a question.
I'll allow that. I want to take the opportunity while Manager Hanton is coming to the microphone to remind everyone that please respect the integrity of the process, limit your comments. That means everyone, even everyone up here. Just, I'm hearing a few people talking in the audience or responding to some comments, and just respect that process. I never allow clapping or cheering or booing or hissing, and that's just always my policy. So, Manager Hanton.
If I may, and Brandy, you and I touched a little bit on this the other night, but you said something tonight that's got me a little bit confused. The mayor's process was that we had to have a consensus coming out of council for something to be given to staff and then ultimately be given to the Plan Commission for consideration. And then when I went to the meeting the other day, the add-on of convention center and banquet facilities was on there. So that was really contrary to what the process was, in my opinion. But you said you made a comment earlier, Brandy, about it's in use in the ordinances now. Well, I'm not sure what that means.
Yes, so it is already defined in the ordinance, so it's in the BP Business Park District that it would be an allowable use. I can't recall if it's a permitted or conditional use.
But it's not in the CL where we're talking about.
Right, so something there would be that either it could be, you could strike it completely and not have it a part of the ordinance, or move it to conditional. It wouldn't have to stay at permitted, it was just for discussion.
To me, it should be omitted from or removed from it. It has not been agreed to or discussed by this council yet, unless somebody wants to leave it on and have discussion afterwards. But to me, that's got possibility of being something much bigger than I think we're ready for, personally, at and around the lake.
Councilman Danforth, City Manager Mack would like to address that item if you're willing to allow her.
Thank you.
He's stealing my time, by the way.
No,
he stopped. He stopped you. You're good.
I mean,
Thank you.
and I didn't use, and when Brandy was speaking, I turned off the clock, so it's like, I'm not.
So I'd just like to provide a little bit of clarification. So Councilman Danforth is right. This did not follow the process that was outlined by the mayor. We have discussed that internally, and the way that we typically handle text amendments for the zoning ordinance is staff will usually draft them and they connect dots. Oh, hey, this makes sense here, and they bring them forward for consideration. That's what happened in this case. She was working on the draft amendments that had been discussed, that there was consensus around, and just followed the normal process that we would do. And that's why it's in there. If you want to take it out, take it out. If you want to move it to conditional, it was not an intentional, we're trying to slide something in. It was, oh yeah, I'm connecting this dot because it makes sense that we would discuss convention and banquet facilities under CL.
And Councilman Danforth, I agree with you. I want to just say that I want to thank the council. You all were very you all did very well in following the procedure that I dictated, and that has brought us to this point today. And out of respect for that process, I would be in favor of striking the convention center and banquet facilities simply because it has not gone through the same rigorous screening that all of the other proposed changes have. And I also don't think it's, at this time, it is appropriate to be adding things necessarily when we're trying to restrict them. Councilman Danforth, back to you.
Mayor, I appreciate that. Some of this is going to go a little bit towards, maybe should I wait if I have a question in regards to the proposed rezoning? Because it really is our zoning. Can I ask a question, and you can either nix it or
Yeah,
whatever?
or save it for later, sure.
Okay, I want to go to the horses thing. Years ago, I think I was on the plan commission at the time when there was this whole thing that went through and eliminated horses from the city, and hooved animals or split hooved animals and all this kind of stuff. My understanding at the time was that they were not permitted in the city of Watertown. When I read ordinances this week, really after, as a result of our last council meeting, Mayor, I think they said that staff had considered horses to be recreational. I'm confused as heck in reading our ordinance because it specifically says, when you look at animals, under the, I don't remember what ordinance number it is, but it says in there that they're not permitted in R1 through R4. And that's it. Doesn't say anything about RG, which is residential garage. So that tells me they could be used in any of the other zones. It could be used, the horses could be in any commercial, any industrial business park area, because it only prohibits them, that I read, from the residential. So question I have is it seems wrong to me compared to what I know way back when that we had discussions on. But if it's allowed as a recreational use, we don't even limit the number of horses that a commercial business could have. You can have a whole herd of them. So there seems to be some oddities, and I know that request is going to come in, and one of their intentions is boarding horses or horse therapy. That really needs to get looked at by us so that those individuals know what they're buying into. That's problematic for me. And the only other thing I have for right now, I'm struggling with a little bit in the campground scenario. We're saying that we can't have a mobile home and we can't have a manufactured home. But yet, apparently, we allow park models to be into these places. Park models apparently are considered an RV by whatever association they're associated with, but they aren't insured as an RV. They're insured as a mobile home. The insurance industry insures them as a mobile home. So, and we have an insurance agent right up there. He probably can say yeah or nay on that too. So I'm confused with what we're allowing when it comes to that in the campground ordinances. Why the campground ordinance originally still does state that you can't have a mobile home or manufactured home there, but yet park models are apparently allowed. And all it is basically it's a small version of a mobile home. So I think there's some, again, to me, there's clarification and discussion that has to take place. What was our intent when we said no mobile homes, no manufactured homes? But yet now, somewhere along the line, somebody's defined these little mobile homes as park models, call it an RV. So I think that needs to be looked at and discussed. The only other thing I think is for those of you that are up here in the council standpoint, if you have not spent time reading through the Lake Compesca Master Plan, take time to read through that before you comment for the second reading, because to me, it says an awful lot in there. So, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. I have 4 questions that Councilman Danforth asked that were not answered, and I want to allow city staff the chance to chime in. So Community Development Manager Hanton, please come back to the microphone. While I'm doing so, I will tell the public that you can find a copy of the Lake Compesca Master Plan on the city's website. I'm not exactly sure where, but I do believe that it's in our website. There were 4 questions Councilman Danforth asked that were not answered, at least as far as I can remember. One was regarding the convention centers, if it was successful and then it brings more traffic, is who would be responsible for upgrading the roads for redevelopment? City Manager Meck?
Well, I would just comment, Mayor, I think it might be more helpful if we got a list of questions and could provide answers back. Some of these are not necessarily community development related, and I want to make sure that we're giving accurate information and just not off the cuff answers that we're going to have to go back and correct if we got it wrong.
Okay, I can allow that. I will ask the other questions, though, just to put them on the record, and if you do feel more confident in regard to providing an answer at this time, I would encourage so, because we do have people that took time to come and talk about this issue and care about it, and so obviously we can provide them answers at the second reading, but I don't think it's, the answers will have to be provided to the public. They've been asked, and I want that on the record. So who decides miscellaneous? And Manager Hanton?
So that's just with the definition, just because you don't want to be too explicit on what the uses are. The ones that are provided are just for as examples, so you know what is relative to that use that it's defining.
Another question was in regard to horses. I know that was brought up at the Plan Commission. I understand that this might not be ready to answer today, but if you do feel like it.
Well, so yeah, I think Lisa would be, or Attorney Carrico would be the best
And
person for that.
final question was park models versus mobile and manufactured homes.
That one too.
I could, just as it relates to park models, because we got asked the same questions and we were unaware. In the research that we have found, they're defined by the federal government as RVs, much like the federal government defines mobile homes and manufactured homes. And it is explicitly not a manufactured home or mobile home. I can't speak to the insurance on that.
Okay. Thank you very much. And we will get answers and have those cited at the second reading of the public hearing for the ones that did not have answers yet today. Further discussion, Council. Councilman Bueller.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I want to elaborate a little bit more. I think Ms. Conrady had some very good input for us this evening regarding the roads and concerns for flooding, and certainly those things have to come into play before we allow any type of zoning at the Planning Commission level, and then when it comes to us at our level. I just also want to say that we got the ball rolling with changing the zoning ordinance as it existed. One of the things Mike Danforth and myself, we actually submitted a plan of our own. Yeah, and anyway, I will say that I think that it's better than it was, the proposed, but it's still, in my opinion, I think it's still kind of a watered down version of what I think we should have. My proposal was, and for those of you who don't know, I had a lakeside proposal. In other words, like I called it a CLS, so commercial lakeside. So if you're right on the lake, we would treat that zoning a little bit differently than we would to properties that would be adjoining or abutting those properties outside the lake or on the other side of a road. And, there's a number of things that came up. I know some other concerns that I heard from the audience tonight. The definitions, when we look at those, obviously those are of some concern to me. And if we look at the new proposed amendment, we look at retail establishments. Retail establishments, I'm going to read this. It says, establishment engaged in selling products, goods, or merchandise to the general public for personal or household consumption, and establishments engaged in providing services or entertainment to the general public, including convenience stores, petroleum sales, repair shops, indoor amusement, copying services, health professional education, social services, and then we get into this ambiguous statement here that says and other miscellaneous services. Okay, that's that definition, and that is in the permitted uses under the new proposal. The other one that concerns me a bit is service establishments, which says establishments offering a wide range of personal services, laundry, hair care, and it was stated earlier, and then it says et cetera. Okay, what does that mean? I mean, I don't know what et cetera means exactly. But those are some things that I'm concerned about. And I also want, I agree, I have some concerns with the convention center and the banquet facilities. I know this has been addressed, but I just want you to know that surprised me when I saw those amendments to this and where they came from. So it appears that city staff can just plop in what they think would work into these things. And maybe it was in Business Park, but that I was a little bit confused by that. I would prefer to see this a little bit more restricted in the permitted uses and a few less things in conditional uses. You know, we always have to be mindful, and I know I've said this ad nauseum, probably, but when we set up an ordinance for a zoning ordinance and we have a permitted use, we have to be really, really careful with that because, as I've said before, these are things that will follow that, and you cannot rely on the fact that the owner, how great a person or great a plan they got, is going to continue or persist down the road. And these things, they sell, they evolve, they change. So we have to be really, really careful about what we allow for permitted uses in these areas. But I think, Mike, you had 3 different zones. You had one that you proposed was more of a lakeside, then another one for, on the other side of the road, and then something even beyond that. But, we can loosen up the restrictions a little bit when we get on the other side of the road for certain things. But moving a lot of these things into conditional uses is helpful, and we always have to remember it is R1 all the way around this lake. But and people have to agree, the Planning Commission has to agree to allow them to get a CL designation. So it's not just that. And if they want a conditional use, then they also have to apply for that. So it's not an automatic thing, but I just think we got to be careful with what we do at that lake, what we do around the residences, keeping in mind that these will pertain to Lake Pelican as well. So what we do here is also going to pertain to that lake. So I agree. I think we still have a little work to do on this thing. I think I'd prefer to be just a little bit more conservative on permitted uses and even some of the conditional uses that we have in here. And that mainly just so we protect those folks that live on the lake, but also we still want to be able to do some development out there to help with the use of our lake facilities. One other, I do have, Mayor, if I could, a question. Brandy, if you could, I have a question for you, if you don't mind.
Manager Hannon?
Yeah, sorry. Community Community Development Hannon. Thank you, Manager Hannon. The question I have, and I think I know the answer, but I need to know for sure. On permitted uses, we struggled to finally get campgrounds out of dwellings and moved into as its own entity in conditional uses. What about townhouses, condominiums, twin homes, that kind of stuff? Where does that fit in on CL?
So that will the dwelling units that will be allowed will be the ones that are listed behind apartments. So only those. So because it's CL, if you have say an R3 multifamily residential district, that you actually can build a duplex or a single family home on that zone lot because it's residential. For CL, it will be specifically those listed dwelling types that are within that definition.
Okay. And then one other thing, it looks like we have apartments now as its own separate entity. Is that correct? We've peeled that away from the dwelling units definition?
Yep.
Okay, that's good. Boat repair shops, that's another one that just popped into there. Can you explain that just a little bit? Why we did that?
Yep. So that, and I kind of touched on it when I was doing the introduction, but there were a lot of words there. So the reason is because retail establishment had the repair shop mentioned in that definition, and auto body repair shops are already in a defined use. And so we wanted to specifically call out a boat repair shop for marine repairs because that's more appropriate to be located near the lake, to be in the Lake Commercial District. And then the auto body repair shop is an existing use that takes care of other types of repair uses.
And Mayor, if I may, one other question I have, and that is, why could we not put retail establishments and service establishments in conditional uses? Why do we have to have that in permitted uses? What's the reasoning behind that?
So just, and I don't know if Manager Mack, if you want to, are you okay with me? Okay. Just because those are typical permitted uses in commercial districts. In all other commercial districts, they are permitted.
But wouldn't you agree this is a whole lot different when it's by the lake? I have to believe that.
Well, I think that it's very commercial in nature. Those are typical commercial uses. So I personally, I don't, but that's personally.
Okay, thank you.
City Manager Mack, did you want to add something?
Just to reiterate that, the change in that definition came out of the discussions from the council. There didn't appear to be any consensus on council to move retail establishments into a conditional use.
May I, Mayor? I will say that in my proposal, I did not have either one of those in CL on permitted uses.
Sure, but they're currently part of the CL zoning. They're not something new that's being added. They exist currently as a permitted use.
Right, and my suggestion is just that we move it to conditional uses, those two.
Sure. I'm just clarifying with everything except the banquet facilities, the process was where there was consensus from the council. That's what we would present.
Councilman Tupper.
Could I ask Councilman Bueller something? Am I fine with that?
Yeah.
Don't shake your head at me over there.
It will get to be Councilman Beeler, you have the right to answer or not.
Okay.
Depends on what he has.
I'm kind of lost there with your question is why should we allow retail at the lake? You just said that. Why should we allow retail at the lake? If there wasn't for retail at the lake, one of the oldest businesses in Watertown wouldn't be there, and that's Compesca Lodge. And I know we're talking way, way years ago, but let's get to reality. We got campgrounds at the lake that have been there for years. We've had retail around the lake that's been there for years. Why should we treat it differently now?
Councilman Beeler, would you like to answer that question?
Sure, absolutely. All I'm saying, Randy, is that it goes into conditional uses. So if somebody applies for CL, they can apply for a conditional use. It's not in permitted. Because as we know, we say some of these other things. Say we've got restaurants, religious institutions, recreational use in CL. We can designate those as those are permitted uses. Somebody buys it under the guise that they're going to use it for that. Somebody down the road, or they can change their mind and they could put in a lot of those things that may not be very savory to the folks that are in that vicinity. That's why I'm saying if we move it to conditional use, Randy, they still can do it. They could still have all those retail places, but it's got to go through the steps so that it gets reviewed and approved for that. Because if you look at those definitions, Randy, they're pretty broad. They cover a lot of things that might not fit very well right next to the lake.
Okay, so my question, Mayor?
You still have the floor, Councilman.
Okay. So my question is, and this, I guess, what I'm trying to get at. Are we more restrictive with those permitted uses or conditional uses, however you want to look at it, within the proper city limits of Watertown?
Is that a question that you wish to ask to Councilman Bueller? Or just
Or
to
whoever
anybody?
can answer it. If Community Development Manager Hanton can answer that?
Manager?
Yes, so we are not. So service establishments and retail establishments are permitted use in all other commercial districts that would be able to be utilized in city proper.
So, and I'm not against the conditional use. I'm just saying, we're going to look at ordinances all around the city itself. Because the lake is part of the city. I'm here. I like to go to the lake. And just like back to treating the lakeside different than the other side of the lake, we can't treat one person on one side of the road differently than we can on the other.
We're going to go Councilman Shetty, then Councilman Peters. Councilman Shetty.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, first off, I really appreciate this discussion within the council, but also with the community input and just being able to work through this. I am for continued discussion, as Councilman Danforth had mentioned earlier. So my one question would be, and I know the answer, but just to make sure we understand this, let's just say if this ordinance were to pass. Being that I'm for continued discussion, we don't have to wait 6 months, a year, 5 years. We could continue this right away, I believe. And so that's just one, I just want to get my thoughts on that particular point there, that I do hope we do continue, because there's more points to be made. One of the things was mentioned was apartments, and that's one item that I brought up when we originally started our discussions here, and what I brought up to the mayor was apartments and where to position those, and traffic flow and roads, and just for many reasons. I lived at the lake for 13 years, and so I do have a little bit of a pulse out there from living out there and appreciating the quality of life out there. And so that, like I said, I'm for some more discussion on this as far as that goes. Another second thing here would be the conditional use we're talking about. It was brought up, if just make them all conditional uses or whatever it may be. I know there's a few councilmen here that may have been on the planning commission or other boards potentially. How long have you been doing stuff for the city, Councilman Bueller? 30 years? There's positions in the city, planning commission, board of adjustments, where I guess I see it as teamwork. And so when we have men and women in those positions, I do want to value those positions and what they, and trust that they may have the proper insight. We may not always agree. We don't always agree around this table. And so just to have that in place, I do continuing to have conditional uses as well, but where they can, not all conditional uses. I mean, there's certain things we just gotta dial in and do. But I do appreciate it, working as a team and not trying to navigate through this or manage this in a way where the council tries to take all the control on this. I do think we need to do it in a way where we still have the Board of Adjustments, Planning Commission all getting involved. Thirdly, I got a question here, I guess, and then when I get the answer, I want to move forward with this. When was the commercial lake, zoning ordinance adopted? When was it? When did it originally get on board? 2020.
City manager.
Okay.
May of 2020.
May of 2020.
May of 2020.
So three and a half years. Yeah, and so with that, we haven't had any major, we've had a few, we had a thing or two to vote on, I guess, but so far, I guess that's good that we don't have a lot of major things that we've had to dodge with the current zoning. The reason I bring that up is what it was mentioned, having a moratorium on this. If we, let's look at this and review it and take some more time. I'm not a big fan of a moratorium, unless, of course, we've had some serious issues in the last 3 years. Granted, anything can happen, but I'm just going to use my, maybe for not a great example, but my son's soccer, fall of 2020, senior year. It was a senior year. They didn't have a moratorium, if you will, on soccer in South Dakota, that is, at least after, during the COVID season. And that 1 year was a big deal for him. That was his senior year, for him to be able to appreciate and enjoy his quality of life his senior year. Well, developers or landowners or people that want to do something, maybe this is the time, season of their life to develop something, to purchase something. I'm not a big fan of just halting someone's desire to move forward with a project just because of this discussion. So that's why I'm not a big fan of a moratorium, unless, again, there's something proven that we've got some major issues that have come about. If that hasn't happened, I am for the changes. I am. I'm for the changes that we have. I would vote for those changes. However, I do know there are more discussions to be had, and so just kind of establishing those points, I guess, as far as where my take is on this, and appreciate this process. So, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Peters.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a great discussion. I appreciate this very much. Being new to the council, it gives me something to consider, and I would say that your comments are heard, well received. I've heard from a lot of lake residents, their concern for development in the other area. I guess what I would caution my fellow council members on is, on the flip side of this, it was mentioned that this was passed in May of 2020, correct? I've also heard concerns from developers around the lake that when are the field goal posts going to stop being moved? And I'm all about taking a look and adopting something that everybody can agree on. What I'm cognizant of is coming back here every time a permit is dropped and saying, no, this doesn't fit. We got to look at something else. Because I want to put myself in the, applicant's shoes to say, well, I followed the rules, I dropped my application, and now things are being changed. So I see both sides of it. I would say, from what I'm hearing, we've got a long ways to go before we come up with a product. To Councilman Shetty's point, a moratorium. I do development all over the state and the Midwest, and we are usually against moratoriums. Moratoriums are a very scary word in the development sector. And they're scary because I view them personally as policies have not been kept up with, therefore we're panicking, we got to push the pause button. So I look at that as scary. It's a scary precedent for Watertown. Certainly we're talking about the lake here, which is a completely different animal to some respect within the community. But I'd be cognizant of placing a moratorium on CL, because what's to say we wouldn't put a moratorium on something else? So I guess I would round out my comments with, I appreciate all the discussion. This is something we certainly need to take a look at deeper before we make a decision. But again, I would hate to come back here every time an application is dropped and say, hey, we haven't made these, more restrictive. We need to hone in on something. I think we need to set a policy and live with it to some respect. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I am going to time myself as well. Just want to chime in before I open it up for second comments from everyone. I want to say I don't think I'm opposed to any idea that I've heard up here tonight or even out in the public. And this process started because there was a consensus among the council that something with CL had to change. We weren't exactly sure what or what scope, but we were all in agreement that something had to change. So we had to start the process somewhere. And that's why we did 2 work sessions, and I just placed the stipulation that I want at least something that can pass, because we needed something that could pass to start this process changing. And now that this process has gone this far, you can see how there is already consensus building for other changes as well. So I really do not think this is over, but we had to start somewhere. And that was the only reason why I put that stipulation on the council, because I just wanted productive conversation, because we had 2 work sessions. Between those and personal conversations and the CL zoning requests that have come to the council already this year, we have spent hours and hours, and we really weren't getting very far. At least tonight, we have something in front of us that is changing this, making it better. Is it at the point where everyone wants it? I would say definitely not. I don't think any one of us is completely satisfied with the changes that we see here. But at least this is something that is moving it in a positive way. I also do want to say something along the lines of what Councilman Peters was talking about with developers. We have to be very careful with the reputation that Watertown has. And we want to work with developers at the same time as protecting homeowners. We just got a presentation earlier tonight from the Watertown Development Company explaining to us how developers are sitting on lots doing nothing, and they don't know why. That begs the question, are they doing nothing because they do not trust Watertown? Or don't trust the process, or they question, are the goalposts going to change? So we have to be very careful about just wholeheartedly swiping ordinances or moratoriums. It's a matter of being very cautious with what we're doing, but at the same time, always trying to move it in a positive, forward way. And that's where I stand. So I support the changes that we're seeing here. I do want convention center and banquet facilities struck. I don't think that went through the process. So I would like that removed before the second hearing. And as far as like the other amendments, I think that we can definitely start bringing those up right away after the second reading on this one. So that is what I have to say about that, and I'll open it up for second comments from the council. Councilman Danforth.
Thank you, Mayor. If I can I ask Brandy a question? Brandy, how many CL applications in total have we had? I've got 4 that I know of for sure. Do you know, roughly? 4 or 5? 4. You know, we talk about not wanting to change the ordinance, and we got to be careful of changing the ordinance language for the developers. Well, how do they feel when they come and they request the CL and it gets denied 3 out of 4 times? That's a red flag. That should tell us something. I would rather have the rules changed, knowing that I can go submit a request with the highest probability that it's going to get accepted and passed, than 75% of them that we've had today have been denied. And the question, and I would have this for Attorney Carrico, because I really don't know the answer to this. If we have this ordinance, comprehensive use plan says that the whole lake area, and the lakes, but I'm going to focus on Compesca at this point. And then we got a defined boundary that should be considered for development, commercial development. What's our basis? I come in and apply. I may not have any idea what I want to put there. I don't even have to tell you what I want to put there. I just have that spot that I want to rezone to CL. What is the basis for the Plan Commission and this council to reject that? Can't say that it's not a large enough area. Can't say it's a traffic issue because I don't know what's going in there. What's the basis for rejection, other than public outcry?
I'll open it up to any city employee who wants to answer that, but I do think Councilman Peters wanted to say something about that question.
Yeah, I'm looking for some advice on it because I don't know what I'd do.
Well,
Attorney
not going to
Carrico?
give legal advice over in a public meeting. However, I would say that what I think everybody needs to remember too is that the city itself has engineering standards, we have subdivision standards, we have standards coming out everywhere that will dictate whether or not something gets changed to a commercial lake, because no one's going to request it if they can't already do something that is on one of those items. Because let's say it's too small of a lot, like Brandy talked about. I mean, in some of these permitted uses and in the conditional uses, there's already restrictions apart from what is literally listed. We can't just buy one little house and say we're going to tear it down and build a campground. There's already restrictions regard to density. Brandy's going to know more of that than I am, right? So I think everybody I understand that some changes need to be made. You guys have had it in operation for 3 years. Obviously, you can, there's some good data to probably do some changes. Personally, I would say you probably need a couple more years under the belt before making any big changes. But I think everybody forgets that this isn't the only thing that's going to dictate what goes next door to their house. And actually, is it all right, Mayor? I do have something for the council to ponder. And I'm going to put Brandy on the spot a minute because I don't actually know. I was looking through all the definitions while you guys were talking because I don't deal with this stuff every day. Brandy does. So let's say I wanted to buy a house and my concept in my head, right, is I'm in the Black Hills and I see this old mansion or old house and someone operates it as like a wedding venue. You can go and have a private party. Maybe it only holds 50 people, maybe 100 people, and they want to hold these private events. And that's all they want to do in that house. Would that fall under, I looked up recreational use and recreation facility. Those seem more like public. Would it be banquet or convention? I mean, when I first saw it and you guys were a little nervous as we were talking in public, and this is just an example, I'm not asking for comment back at this time, I'm asking you to ponder. I think of a big facility, right? I'm thinking of event center, I'm thinking of the sandbar, I'm thinking, big things. But I'm saying, let's say somebody who has a big lot and they have their, old house and somebody goes to buy it and they decide that that's what they would like to do. Would you at least want that available to them, at least under a conditional use? Because maybe wherever they're located and maybe their neighbors next door to them don't really care because it's a smaller thing. We're not talking about, concerts and whatnot. We're talking about a little, facility, old building that somebody wants to hold a wedding in. And that's what they want to do. And that's all they do. They don't use a restaurant. They don't do a bar. It's just a venue for somebody to rent to have their, private ceremonies or retirement party or whatever it is that they want to do. So I would just caution you on, I know that when we were in the work session, we did try to advocate like, well, what don't you want? Because then at the lake, ever, and we will take that out. And then what would need to be reviewed by the Planning Commission, or at least an opportunity for people to come forward and say, hey, we don't want that there next in that lot or whatever. And then what is free for permitted use, keeping in mind though, which sometimes we tend to forget, is that there are also many building codes, engineering standards, floodplain, wastewater. I mean, there's so many stuff that goes into the actual permitting that they can't do it there anyway. So that's why these permitted and conditional uses are here. But again, it's up to you guys, along with the constituents, the living out at the lake. Well, and frankly, the whole community. I mean, I understand that they live there, but I mean, really, it's the whole community. What do they want out at the lake? And what are we really talking about? I just want people to go down some path when in reality, we already have other items in place that dictate what can actually go on a particular lot. So that's all I have. Thank you, Mayor. Sorry if I took up more than 10 minutes.
Our city attorney was answering partly your question, but I also know that Councilman Peters and Councilman Bueller both had reference. I don't want to, you still have the floor if you want them to chime in.
I just want to go back to it because I disagree. If I'm going to get this zoned, I'm going to ask for it, and I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to do there. All the stuff that you mentioned, Ms. Carrico, comes after the fact, after we've already rezoned this, right? I'm going to go and I'm going to figure it out with engineering and whoever to figure out what I got to do, whatever I put in there, okay? We're talking about something that is a precursor to all that, and that's the rezoning. If I don't tell you what it is, how does the Plan Commission what is their basis to deny it? Or what is our basis to deny? When we just look at it and go, it's just a piece of land, it's a cabin they're gonna tear down. We don't know what they're doing with it. They haven't asked for any variances. How do we say no? Can't say it's the road because we don't know how many cars they're gonna have there. Because if it's the road, that encompasses basically the whole lake. So what's the basis for denying?
How do they do it now?
Right now, we don't have such broad spot zoning issues. We don't, that's a rare thing for us to even be having discussion about spot zoning. That's the issue here. Redevelopment and spot zoning. New development is probably less of an issue, but we have transitional guidelines that we use day in, day out in our development. We aren't doing that here. All of those are going out the window. Okay, we don't have transitioning. We use screening. We've talked about that. There's no transitional development here.
But are you under some impression that they have to give it outright?
I don't know what that means. Give what outright?
If they ask for, you guys were on planning? So if they make the request, do you have to grant it outright? Yeah, sorry. Councilman Bueller. I guess I feel like I'm having a
I
debate.
thought the dialogue was with Mike, but
Yeah, and it is. Councilman
Yeah.
Beeler, you don't have to answer that. It's Councilman Danforth still has the floor.
We've talked about the uniqueness about the lake and what this encompasses. And a lot of what is in here, it kind of goes to Mr. Tupper's comments earlier, and that is, it's different than what we would do within the city proper. Completely different. We would never allow most of this in city proper. We just wouldn't do it. So it becomes a non-issue in those instances. But I don't know how I deny it. I really don't. I don't know what's going in there. Because they've said the whole lake should be considered. How do I deny it?
Councilman Beeler.
Thank you, Mayor. Mike, I just want to clarify, it is transitional. It's transitional from R1. Okay? It is. That's important. I mean, because that's what this is all about. I mean, when you look at permitted uses here, folks, when you look at permitted uses, you have to say to yourself, okay, somebody comes in, they want something real docile. They got a recreational use they want to put in there. If they apply for that CL, everything in those permitted uses can be used on that property. That's what we have to remember. And that's for years out, they can do that. And so that's why we have to be careful. Let the Planning Commission, let the folks that volunteer to study these issues and make the decisions that are right for the community, look at that and say, well, okay, that can be a conditional use. Let's decide from a conditional use standpoint whether or not we want to let that go. To me, it isn't that hard. And I think once we've established this thing, as far as developers go, they know exactly what we are proposing, what they can and cannot do. But it does come to, even if you want a variance, you still got to go to the Planning Commission or the Board of Adjustments to get a variance. You know, it's subjective. That's something they have to look at and they have to decide. Those folks are put in place and they do a great job of reviewing those and looking at all aspects of whether it should or should not be there, or if it's the proper use for that. But when you got folks in residential neighborhoods and it's by the lake, it's CL. CL, it's not R1, not just R1, but CL is commercial lake. That's what makes it unique. And so, you know, those are the things I think we got. And that's why I firmly believe a couple of these things moved into conditional use, and we got her covered. That's my opinion.
Community Development Manager Hanton, did you want to say anything?
So I just wanted to speak to the spot zoning, and Councilman Bueller actually kind of clarified that, where we have our map where CL zoning is appropriate, and that is because it is to accommodate the existing R1 single-family residential to be kind of that buffer or transitional zone to allow for some commercial uses for the purposes that are outlined with the CL district. So it wouldn't be a spot zone, and that's kind of a loosely used term where the CL district was created to be the transitional zoning for the Lake Kempesca and Lake Pelican. And also that you would not be utilizing the C3 Highway Commercial District, the C1 Community Commercial, which is downtown, and the C2, which is actually more so along arterials to the north. So though it's trying to create the niche that the lake is and to allow for some commercial activity.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councilman Tupper.
I'm going to be quick here. And you stole part of my parade there, that's why. But Mr. Clifton gave us quite the presentation tonight. Right now, if I was a developer in Watertown, I think I'd lock my doors and leave, because this body just can't seem to come together and make a decision. All the conversations tonight are very great conversations, but it's just like putting a moratorium on it. We just keep kicking the can down the road. So my comments, thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Peters.
Yeah, I'll make mine quick too. There was some discussion about commercial facilities, and if we didn't do any commercial facilities on the lake, my wife and I have 2 kids, and we don't live on the lake. And if we didn't have the sandbar and places like that, there's a lot of people like me and my family that wouldn't be able to enjoy the lake. So I would just keep in mind for this body when we're making these decisions that if we try to make commercial development harder. I know Councilman Danforth mentioned that there were 4 CL applications, and Community Manager Hanton, there's been 3 denied. Well, how can we expect for developers to rally around this ordinance if we can't even rally around this ordinance? So I guess I would just leave it at that. We've got plenty of work to do, and it sounds like we're just getting started. So thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? Attorney Carrico?
Sorry, Mayor, because I was also thinking about the revision process and what you guys were making comments today that, yes, I did not answer Mr. Danforth's question. So when it comes before the Planning Commission, they would look at the request, where the request is. The adjoining landowners would be notified of the fact that there's a zone request being made. There would be a public hearing, and they would go through basically the permitted uses and see if that was a good fit for that piece of land. Now, the person who's applying may reveal what they are looking for in hopes that it helps with the decision, but yes, they don't have to. Most of them do. I have seen the Planning Commission deny a request. I don't believe, though, it was for a CL. That was the piece of land between Stony Point and the bay, and because the person didn't know what they were going to do with it, and they did not appear. Also, though, there were I don't think anybody came to oppose, but the Planning Commission did deny it because they didn't feel that it was a right fit. So yeah, they look at the ordinance, they look at the permitted uses, they decide, is this the best spot? And based on any community involvement, which we've all seen with the Mansell, came forward, right? Everybody came. So, I mean, those are the checks and balances that happen, which I guess from my opinion, but of course I'm an attorney, that's a good thing. That's what's supposed to happen. If you really are opposing something, then you come forward and you explain it to the Planning Commission, you explain it to the council, and they make their decisions. Because there are many applications that come forward that nobody opposes, nobody comes in. Brandy's standing alone at the podium and decisions are made. So that, in answer to your question, that's how the process works.
Thank you very much. Councilman Beeler?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say, I don't believe for 1 second that developers are looking at this and saying, oh, we're not going to do anything in Watertown. I totally disagree with that. We've changed these ordinances many times. Our zoning ordinances over the years that I was on the planning commission. Mike, you know that, all the time. We tune them up, we change them all the time. This is nothing new. We just got to come to a consensus because this is a relatively new thing for us. It's a new zone, and we got to be careful with it. You know, we can't be willy-nilly on this thing because we want to hurry it through and not kick the can down the road. This is important. We do this right. And so that's why I think it does, I think we do have to give it a little pause, step back, and I know this body, as always, will come to a consensus and we'll agree and we'll all walk out of here buddies at the end of the day.
Manager Hanton?
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify because Engineer Peterson let me know that there have been 5 applications for the CL district. 3 have been denied, 1 is pending. But we were forgetting about Prairie Winds Golf Course addition and then Stony Point. Those are the 2 that have been approved for the CLA Commercial District. Just wanted to clarify.
Was Stony Point under CL? I thought that.
Yeah.
I mean, are you talking the apartment building or the condominium?
So where the
Building?
condo is, that is C2 because we did not have CL
Yeah,
available at the time.
that's what I was clarifying because that came before CL.
Yep. And then, but the rest of the area is zoned CL.
Okay. Councilman Jurgens, I want to give you an opportunity if you want to say something. You haven't raised your hand or anything, but I just wanted to recognize you. Also make it clear, I don't think he said so, but he's got a daughter that is playing for the Arrows in varsity volleyball, and that's a big deal. So, Councilman Jurgens, do you have anything that you would like to add?
Yeah, I do. And actually the examples that were just brought up are the reason why people are coming out and speaking up. They've had 3 years now to look, and there's a couple examples of why they're going to keep continuing to come out and why if we do need to move the goalposts, they should be done. We are here to make changes and adjust to the things that have been happening out there. And people are going to be more passionate the further this keeps going, and we have multiple places for them to go. Would I like to see more? Absolutely. But responsibly done and done correctly. Now you can tell I am starting to get passionate because I sat back here and listened to all this, but there are places to be done. It can be done responsibly, yet if we don't do this the right way, the city is going to have people breathing down their throat. We as councilmen will have people breathing down their throat. And I think right now, it's a great place to develop apartments in Watertown. There's nothing wrong with this dialogue. I think it's very healthy, and I think it's going to progress this city into the next stage that we're heading to down the road. Thank you. Over to you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman Jurgens. Any further questions, comments, discussion? All right. Like I said, this is just a first reading. We will be back in 2 weeks to have a second reading on this. Thank you very much. We are going to go back to item B. Megan Norgard was here, and I apologize because that was on me. I should have called for public comment like I did on this item, and that was my mistake, not your mistake. So I am going to just rise and turn back on the air conditioning, or if someone can do that for me, if it went off. Not that it really helps much, but Mrs. Norgard, if you would like to come forward. So just for the council, we are back on item B, which is regarding the Kranz addition and the request to change it from R1 to C2.
Okay, so as stated, I live in the lot to the south of this particular lot. And my husband and I are very, very concerned just because when we purchased the lot, we were under this understanding that it was residential and not commercial. Our big thing too is light and sound. So we have the alley right there, and I know everybody needs to empty their garbage, but every single Thursday morning at 7 o'clock, you can hear the dump truck go and dump the garbage down the alley. So it's only gonna get worse if you have more commercial properties there. And I know you can put in like trees and bushes and things to mute that, but there's only so much that it can mute. I know light's another big one. We live right on the corner and there is one of the city lights for the street, and I understand why it's there, but if we didn't have all of the trees that we have there, our lot would be lit up really bright. So I can only imagine having more lights right next door. It would shine right into our house because we have quite a few windows on that side. Along with, we have a bunch of neighbors whose houses back up to that lot. All of their living rooms and kitchens would have all sorts of lights coming in. The other concern, and I know I talked to a couple of my neighbors, is what businesses are going to be going in there. I know, I think Greg Hofteaser had mentioned that one side of the business would be for their real estate business and the other would be for a couple different boutiques or whatever decided to go in. And my neighbors and my concern is what's going in there. Is it going to be open past 5? Is there going to be a lot of traffic? Is there going to be a lot of noise? Because if it was a business that's open later, say 10 or 11 o'clock, and customers are coming and going and they're loud and whatever, and you're trying to go to sleep, that makes living there very difficult. The other main concern is a decrease in property value. And a lot of the neighbors mentioned that to me as well when I was talking to them. We're very concerned. We own our houses, we live there, we bought them under the contention that that was R1. And a lot of us are very concerned that the property value would decrease. So I guess my biggest thing would be if it did pass, is there a way to determine what goes in there? So, thank you.
Thank you very much. There was a question asked, and I didn't know if anyone wanted to answer that. Manager Hatton or Manager Mack? Justin, City Engineer Peterson? Anyone?
No, there would not be. It would be, again, any of the permitted uses that are allowed in the C2 district. And if they wanted to go and ask for something that was a conditional use, then it would be known what they were asking for. If the property were rezoned to C2, then it would go back to the Board of Adjustment, and the adjacent landowners within 250 feet of the property would be notified and could come to that hearing if they were doing asking for a conditional use, which is typically the more intrusive uses. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We're moving on to item 11A, an application for a special event retail license to Lake Area Technical College for the Festival of Trees. We'll go to our finance officer, Bob Zine, for more information.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, before the council is the special event for Lake Area Technical College. This will be for the Festival of Trees, as stated. They've been doing this for multiple years now, and all the application is in and the fee has been paid. So if there's any questions, I can help. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much. I will open up a public hearing. I know that we have representatives from LATC here. I would be glad to give you the microphone to plug this very special, very nice event.
Good evening, Council. Tracy Bisker, Lake Area Tech Foundation. Our Festival of Trees will be November 17th. As Kristen mentioned, this will be our 5th year of having it on campus with a special event. If you do pass it, and we appreciate your support, President Sanderson wanted me to be sure to let the council know that she was sad she couldn't be here herself, but wanted to give you thanks for the support of the festival and Lake Area Tech. So I'll stand by for questions if you have any.
All right, thank you very much. Public hearing is still open. Is there anyone else who would like to testify on this item? I'll close the public hearing. Chair will entertain a motion to approve the application. Motion made by Councilman Tupper, seconded by Councilman Peters. Any discussion on this, council? Hearing no discussion and no opposition, we'll do just a voice vote. All those in favor of approving the application, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. We'll see you there on the 15th. Item 11B is the second reading of an ordinance amending the zoning map of the city of Watertown for the north 150 feet of the 550 feet of the south 834 feet of the southeast quarter section of 34 R52 West in the 5th PM Cottington County, South Dakota, from I-2 Heavy Industrial District to I-1 Light Industrial. Community Development Manager Hannon, you're back.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So to make that legal description simple, this is what will be platted as the DNR addition. And as stated, this is the second reading for the rezone. And I'll pull up this exhibit here to give you a better idea. So currently, the property is zoned I-2. We are looking to rezone it to I-1. I-2 is heavy industrial. I-1 is light industrial. And this will be a part of a land swap, which you will see on a subsequent action for the platting of this property. The property itself conforms to the minimum district requirements. And with that, I'll stand by for any questions.
All right, thank you very much. I will open up a public hearing on this. Is there anyone else who would like to testify on this item? I will close the public hearing and open it up for council action. Do I have a motion to approve the amending of the zoning map? Motion made by Councilman Schutte, seconded by Councilman Bueller. Any discussion on this, council? Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll go to a voice vote. All those in favor of approving the amendment, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Item C is struck. We'll go to item 12A, an approval of resolution number 23-30, the plat of DNR First Edition to the municipality of Watertown. Community Development Manager Hannon.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So this is the plat that I was referring to with our previous action for the rezone. So now this plat shows the proper lot lines for the new district boundaries. It will create, this plat has 3 lots that are all conforming to their appropriate zoning designations. I'll get down here to the plat. Perhaps. Okay, we're getting there. Well, I know now it's actually like slowed down on me here. It wants to go, but I think we overdid it. So for whatever reason, we're just gonna let it hang out. All right, so there's 3 lots. And then the only thing that I want to point out with showing you the face of the plat is there's an access easement that will provide the access to lot 3, I believe it is. Here we go, maybe. Okay. So there's a current approach already off of Highway 212. Since these lots are adjacent to Highway 212, there is access restriction that's regulated by the DOT, the Department of Transportation. So every lot that's platted does need access by a private street or a public right-of-way, public street. So, but what I talked with the owner of this property today, with Dan Rottershot, and we're actually, as long as council is acceptable of this, we'd like to shift this access easement about 15 feet to the north, because he has his sign in this location. So it would be encroaching within this easement, where obviously he will own these 2 properties, lots 1 and 3 today. But if it were ever conveyed, and we have a private street agreement are attached with your agendas as well. That will also be up for authorization for the city manager to enter. So that outlines the maintenance responsibilities for the most part for this private street for the 2 lots. Just as in perpetuity, if this Lot 3 or Lot 1, if they ever had separate ownership. But that's just one modification that we would ask would be made to this plat prior to recording, that this easement, it will stay 28 feet, but it will be shifted to the north about 15 feet, and it will still connect down to this existing approach.
Thank you, Manager Hanton. Point of clarification for the chair. I am not sure that would need to be an official council amendment to this. I think that could be done administratively. But I would ask the council if anyone had opposition to the changing of that access. So Chair will entertain a motion to approve the resolution. Motion made by Councilman Bueller, seconded by Councilman Tupper. Discussion, council. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion and no opposition, we will do a voice vote. All those in favor of approving the resolution, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Item B is an approval of a resolution 23-34 authorizing an application for financial assistance from the South Dakota Department of Agriculture and Natural Resources for improvements to the wastewater system. City Manager Mack is going to start this one.
Thank you, Mayor. You may remember at the last council meeting, we had our consultants from HDR and our engineering staff discuss with you all the wastewater treatment facility improvements that you all approved quite some time ago. We're now further into the design and have more concrete numbers for the cost of the project, which will require an additional SRF loan or funding to efficiently complete all the necessary treatment facility and ancillary collection system improvements. We are requesting permission to apply for the SRF funding through DANR with the state. And we have with us Delron Peters and Michael Johnson from HDR, and we have our assistant city engineer, Justin Peterson, who will stand by for questions and provide additional information for you.
Thank you. City Engineer Peterson, did you want to say something before we move forward? No? I actually do have to do a public hearing on this. Is there anyone else who would like to testify on this item? Close the public hearing. Note to the council that we do have the experts from HDNR here and also from wastewater. So Chair will entertain a motion to approve this resolution. Motion made by Councilman Schutte, seconded by Councilman Bueller. Open it up for discussion. Any discussion, council? Hearing none and no opposition, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor will please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Item C is an approval of insurance policies and authorization for payment for premiums for general liability, auto liability, and physical damage, law enforcement liability, buildings and content, equipment property damage, and equipment breakdown coverage, and authorization for the finance officer to issue a special check. Let's go to said finance officer, Christian Bobzien, for more information.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Yes, before the council is our standard renewal of our insurance, our liability insurance. I will say it did not come in as well as it has in the past, so the total premium increase was 21.4% for both the cities and utility. The cities was right around 23.8%. A few factors that played into that. Our general liability increased by about $32,000. This was due to an increase in payroll and just some more operating expenditures went up. So we're kind of based off of some of our expenditures. Property increased by close to $44,000. South Dakota Public Assurance Alliance did issue a 7.5% increase on all property, and that was because of the economic atmosphere. So everybody that's a member of the South Dakota Public Assurance Alliance did see that increase. We also did not receive our loss ratio. Our current 3-year loss was over 63%, so we lost that. That equates to almost 18,000 of a credit that we did not see this year. Another big change is we had a lot of big additions to our property and equipment. We had multiple street equipment. The new terminal went on at full cost. SRE building is now on insurance at full cost. Many, like I said, street equipment. So those are kind of the reasons for the increase. I mean, we're able to identify why they're there, but that's kind of what you're approving. Utilities has also reviewed their premiums and are in agreement with what they see. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the policies and the authorization. Need a motion? Moved by Councilman Tupper, seconded by Councilman Peters. Open it up for discussion. Council, anything? Close discussion. Go to voting. All those in favor of approving the policies and the authorization of the check, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Item D is an approval to advertise and hire for the new position of Prairie Lakes Ice Arena Facilities Maintenance 2 position with Parks and Rec and Forestry, grade 130, with a starting salary range of between $46,000 to $61,000. City Manager Mack.
Thank you, Mayor. It was about this time last year that we came to the council to request approval of hiring an ice arena manager. This is a position, the Facilities Maintenance 2 position will be considered in the 2024 budget. However, given where we are at in construction of the facility, we wanted to request approval of this position at this time and start advertising because it is advantageous to have this person on staff now, learning and understanding the new systems that are going into that facility. It is much more technical than the current facility, and with that, I would stand by for any questions.
Thank you very much. Chair will entertain a motion to approve the hiring. Motion made by Councilman Peters, seconded by Councilman Shetty. Open it up for discussion. Council? Councilman Danforth?
Was this position planned for in the operating plan for the facility?
Yes.
Okay.
Any further discussion, Council? Hearing no opposition, we'll go to a voice vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. We're on to City Council member announcements and introduction of topics for future discussion. Any council member have anything to add? Go to City Manager report. City Manager Mack.
Thank you, Mayor. I did want to provide a note of clarification for you all after Mr. Tanner's comments earlier. And I had originally shared with him that he could request that the decision that I made be placed on the agenda. After conferring with our legal counsel, we did adopt an ordinance back in 2021 when the former city attorney, Matt Roby, was still here, specifically related to the city manager form of government that lays out an appeals process that citizens can use if if an administrative decision is made that they disagree with or that they have been harmed by. So if Mr. Tanner were to want to continue the discussion about the trees, he would need to follow the administrative appeals process that's outlined in our ordinance. And I gave the wrong information on that. When it comes to two members placing something on the agenda, it would be policy related. So the council wants to discuss the policy around who administers pieces of the ordinances, things of that nature. And it's ordinance 7.22 if you're interested, and we can make sure to send that out to everyone. We have a council work session scheduled for Monday, and we're going to move the time to 4:30 PM instead of 4 PM. And all of this discussion around modifying ordinances and changing ordinances, for those of you that have been on the council, you should be aware of this, and for the newbies, surprise. But we are working through what we call recodification. So once every 10 years, communities have the opportunity to look at their ordinances comprehensively and make updates all at once. And it's quite an undertaking. You go through every title, every chapter. We are working with a consultant called MuniCode. They have provided all of their feedback to us on all of our ordinances. Staff is currently working through their own respective areas, and we're at a point where we'd like to start bringing some of the recommendations and conversations to you all for you to tell us how you'd like to move forward with some of these ordinances. Once the discussion is had, our city attorney will be making the amendments, and I think the goal is by the end of the year, we'll bring one large amendment to you all for consideration and approval. So over the next few days into the weekend, Lisa is going to be sending you the titles that we'll be discussing on Monday. And if we get through whatever she sends you on Monday, that's great. If we don't, we'll continue on into the next work session. It's meant to be a thoughtful discussion. It's meant for you all to dive in and does this still make sense? Does it not make sense? It does not prevent us, however, from addressing one-off issues if we have to as they come up. But this is meant to be a comprehensive look at how we operate as a city collectively. So be on the lookout for those coming from Lisa. She and Mallory are spearheading this process for us. And other than that, those are the only topics for this work session.
Thank you very much. Point of clarification from the chair. There was no Mr. Tanner that testified. It was Mr. Adland.
Apologize, yes.
So just wanted to make that clarification. I just wanted to say something to the council and to the staff. I want to thank you, and to the public as well. I want to thank all of you for a very robust and productive meeting tonight. I want to thank you very much. I think this was good governance in action. We do have a reason to go into executive session for a personnel matter, and we will not be taking any action when we come out, but I do need a motion to go into executive session. Motion made by Councilman Tupper, seconded by Councilman Schutte. Any conversation on that? Hearing none, all those in favor of going into executive session, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Good night and God bless.